This is episode number 54, featuring television personality and PleinAir painter Heiner Hertling. Welcome to the PleinAir Podcast from PleinAir Magazine. I'm your host, Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we dig into the world of outdoor painting, which we call plein air painting. For those who don't know, plein air is a French term that means outdoors. The French say plein air, these others will say plein air, doesn't matter how you say it. What matters is there's a huge movement of artists around the world going outdoors to paint because it's a blast, and the show is all about that movement, the painters, the collectors, the galleries, the art. The podcast is brought to you by Fall Color Week, which is my painter's retreat at Acadia National Park in Maine during the peak of fall color. And no matter where you live in the country, the fall color is more vibrant and better there. Actually, in the world, Maine is known for its amazing color. So we go out painting every day, 2-3 times a day. You stay in one place. All your meals are covered, everything for one price. Lots of friends, lots of new friends, lots of incredible paintable scenery, not just color, but coastal scenes and giant rocky cliffs and beautiful harbors and lobster boats and lighthouses. And you can learn more at fallcolorweek.com. It's coming up in October. You want to get your seat soon. There's not going to be a lot left. It's my desire to see more people fall in love with plein air painting, and you can help by sharing this podcast with your buddies and put it out on social media, email, or otherwise. And I hope you'll subscribe on iTunes or whatever you use for podcasting, and hope it comes to you every single week. We'd love to have you go on iTunes and give us a comment or a rating. And if you have feedback or interview request, email me, Eric at pleinairmagazine.com. The interview is also brought to you by the Plein Air Salon Art Competition, $15,000 grand prize, $31,000 in total prizes for the annual, and we have lots of cash prizes for the bi-monthly. So your last chance to enter is coming up at the end of this month, September 30th. So get your best paintings, go online and enter at pleinairsalon.com. And as we learned last week, somebody who really didn't expect to win won, beat out everybody. So that's cool. Let's get right to our interview. This is a crazy man, Heiner Hertling, who's on television and teaches plein air painting on television and has for several years. Well, today I'm honored to have Heiner Hertling on the line. Actually, if you were in Germany, you would say Heiner Hertling. Herr Hertling. Richtig?
That's very nice. No accent.
My Deutsch is nicht so good, Heiner.
All right. It sounded like your German is not so good.
That's right. That's what I said. Well, I have a whole nother life that relates to Germany we'll talk about someday. So welcome to the PleinAir Podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
I'll tell our listeners just briefly, I had not known about you, and I was sitting home one night, and there was a show, A Brush with Nature, that popped up on Netflix, and it was recommended, and I thought, oh, this is cool, a plein air show. So I watched it. And it was excellent. And it was, of course, something that you had recorded, and your show has been on Netflix for a while now. But you want to tell me the background, how that all started?
Yeah, years ago, I had this idea by watching Bob Ross, for all things. And I found it very entertaining. I found the art very artsy, crafty. It's too much gimmick stuff. So I had this idea of putting a show on television, a painting show, that would be painting, but a little bit more correct academic painting, better techniques and better painting.
Right.
And thank goodness I had a friend in Texas who could financially afford it. Once I explained to him what I wanted to do, we bought the cameras and we started filming. PBS accepted us right away. And then it was nationwide on PBS for about 3 years.
What year did that all begin?
About 5 years ago, when PBS started carrying us. But after 52 episodes, it got a little bit too expensive because, PBS doesn't pay for anything.
Right.
They just, you have to deliver everything in quadruple form just about, and everything is for free.
What does that mean, quadruple form?
I mean, you had to send not just one tape, you had to send backups, and it was very expensive to do. And finally, even my financial supporter gave up and said, "Hey, listen, about $250,000 later, it didn't seem to make much sense anymore." But we got 52 episodes in the can, so that was great.
So how did the show end up on Netflix?
Well, after we stopped filming for a year, a friend of mine, and we closed the company. Actually, we closed Your Brush with Nature, and I retained the rights to the episodes. So my videographer, I think you have met him, Jeremy, or your crew is talking to him.
Yeah.
Jeremy and I formed a partnership, and Jeremy managed to find a company, a distributor of media in New York, that sold the show in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia and some European countries, which sadly we didn't get any financial rewards from it because, I ad-libbed every show. I never had a script. So when this company took us on and wanted to sell our show in different countries, we had to remove the voices, my voice, and we had to create scripts so they could translate it into other languages.
Sure, of course.
Well,
so they were lip syncing to you.
Well, they hired somebody to do all the creating scripts.
Right.
And that ate up all whatever money we would have gotten from the sale.
Right.
But so finally that's all done. And all of a sudden they sold it to Netflix for 13 episodes. And we got the call, "Hey, you guys are going to be on Netflix," which was great. And promptly they didn't renew it now, which upsets me. But
well,
I wish they would.
What I love about it is that it's as you and I have talked in the past, I love anything that promotes plein air painting on a national or international scale, and you have had your show on so many stations around the country, and of course all these other countries. That's really good for plein air painting.
141 countries.
Wow, that's a lot, and it's a good show.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I get that a lot, and mostly what people text me or call me say is it's so easy to watch because when you go oops and you make a mistake, which they like best, you show us how to fix it.
Right. Oh, yeah, I can't imagine you making a mistake, Heiner.
Oh, well, no, yeah, that's very rare, but
yeah, right. So how did this plein air painting thing begin for you?
Oh, in Europe? Okay, let me go back a little bit.
Okay.
I was born in Hamburg, in northern Germany, in 1940.
Yeah.
Which is kind of strange, I think.
So you were born during the war.
Yeah, isn't that kind of weird that you decide, let's have a baby while there's a world war going on? Yeah. I'm glad they did, mind you. But looking back, that's kind of being a parent myself. It's really weird. Anyhow, and then I grew up in Hamburg after the war, which was, people say, "Oh, man, you poor kids, you grew up during the war, everything was bombed out." Well, to us it was paradise because unexplored, bombed out buildings that we could play cops and robbers in, and how kids are, they don't see the bad side.
Right. So did you ever have any recollection of war going on around you when you were a baby or a young child?
Yeah, I do. It's hard to tell if it was told to me or if it's actually my memory.
Right.
We had gone on a vacation to Bavaria, which is in the very southern part of Germany. And my dad was in the military in Venice, stationed in Venice, in Italy. And Hamburg got bombed out while we were on the vacation in Bavaria. So we ended up staying there for 4 years. And I basically, the first 4 years, I grew up in Bavaria.
So was there fighting going on in Bavaria?
Oh, yeah. My mom told us the GIs came by, American GIs, and put a machine gun on our balcony where we stayed and started firing across the lake because there was a German stronghold on the other side. And my mom said, "Excuse me, guys." She spoke very good English, which helped. You know, if you shoot from here, they're going to shoot back this way. I got 3 kids here. And they said, "Well, ma'am, you better get out of here then." So we climbed up in the hills to a cabin up in the mountains and stayed there for a few days till the GIs won that battle against the German stronghold.
Wow.
My mom said she knew when the war was over pretty soon when a couple guys in Capuchin monk outfits knocked on her door and asked for something to drink. And she invited them in. And she said when the guys sat down on the kitchen table, the rope of the monk outfit slipped aside and there were SS boots underneath.
Oh.
And she said, "Oh, the war's over pretty quick when they all hide," and, you know.
Right. Well, you'll have to have a conversation with Carl Dempwolf, who you could listen to the podcast I did with him. But Carl and you were born about the same time, right in the middle of the war. And he was in a part of Germany, I don't remember where exactly, but he saw no evidence of war whatsoever where he was, but quite interesting that you both kind of experienced that.
Yeah, no, I do seem to remember my sister, who was 4 years older than I am, and we had a sister with us that were hired to raise us basically when things were good. So she got caught in Bavaria with us and stayed with us all the time. And she was walking my sister and I down the country road, and all of a sudden you heard a whistle in the sky, and she threw us in the ditch next to the road, and then it went just kaboom. And when we climbed out of the ditch, it was a field that was now a funnel.
So that must have been, what age were you? It must have been horribly frightening.
Well, I was, probably 3 years old or so.
Yeah. Wow. So,
but I seem to remember that. And then I seem to remember I found a parachute in the woods behind the house, white and red. And within a week, our whole village had shirts and skirts and stuff out of white and red silk.
Huh.
That was a major find.
So help me get from there to when you started learning painting.
Okay. So then we moved back to Hamburg, moved in with my grandma's, in my grandma's house, which didn't get bombed. So after 10 years of school, I decided I wanted to be an artist. I didn't need to do the 12-year routine in that school system. Instead, I ended an apprenticeship at an art studio, and I learned what was then called positive retouching, which meant retouching photographs.
Right. So
and it was a 3-year...
hand coloring photographs or retouching them? What's the difference?
Well, retouching included everything. Retouching, black and white, or making black and white photos into color in those days. And included calligraphy and negative retouching. And it was a 3-year apprenticeship that was so thorough that I'm now just really, really thankful for. I hated it when I was doing it because it was so strict. You have a white lab coat on and you got to be there half hour early in the morning and clean the place and wipe all your colleagues that already did their apprenticeship, wipe their rulers clean and wipe their desk clean, and then afterwards stay and clean the place up again. It was a strict apprenticeship, which I now benefit from.
So your studio is probably pristine, your house is perfect, and that's where you got that, right?
wrong again.
So how do you go from retouching photographs to painting or drawing?
Well, the apprenticeship, and one day I got to show you the 3-year logbook I had to keep, which goes by week and day by hour. I had to write down what I was doing. The government kind of keeps an eye on companies who have apprentices so they wouldn't be used to get donuts and wash the boss's car. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They kept an eye on that I was really getting the education I was supposed to get. So I have this logbook one day. I want to show it to you. It's fun. But it started out the first about 3 months. I only had to draw line drawings with a pencil of objects that he would put in front of me. And then after 3 months, it started with shading with a pencil. And then finally, when I got paints, it was like 3 grays and then 5 grays. And then finally, it took color. And oh my God, it was wonderful actually. But I didn't know that in those days.
So it was the same place that you were interning that actually taught you to draw on the shading and then moving into the color and so on, value studies.
Oh yeah, that was all part of the retouching education.
Right, I see. So was the intent of the outcome to train people who were photo retouchers, and if so, why did they have drawing and painting?
Well, retouching includes all that. I mean, sometimes we had to create drawings and paintings that look just like a photo.
I see.
When you get a bad photo of a machine part, and you got to work it over completely, every gear, you better know how to draw.
I see. So
then brought it on illustration too. There were often times when the product they wanted wasn't available, and we had to paint it like a photo.
Okay.
So I actually learned to paint it pretty much like a photograph. Now that became, in my opinion, by having seen Singer Sargent and those people, that there was all of a sudden this understanding that you don't always have to do photographic stuff. If you're good like Schmidt or those guys, with a big stroke, you can create the effect of detail, which really isn't there. And to me, that was miraculous. And so I started painting every free minute I had, even in Germany, outside. A friend of mine and I went PleinAir painting over there.
Now,
have you been in Europe?
Yes.
You certainly have, right?
Yes.
And did you notice that you see people standing on bridges and in museums and stuff painting much more than it used to be here?
I've spent a lot of time in Germany. I've probably been to Germany more than any other place and been there 30 or 40 times. And never in my time there had I ever noticed anyone painting. And
really?
Throughout Europe, I mean, after I started painting, I guess I noticed people painting from time to time, but I never noticed it before. So PleinAir painting was going on when you were in Germany, when you were a young man.
Oh yeah.
Well,
very much so.
That's great to know.
And when I came to the United States in 1965, I never saw anybody painting here. And so a friend of mine that became a neighbor, and I decided, let's go on Saturdays or on the weekend and paint outdoors. And then slowly in the late 60s, and then by the 70s and early 80s, all of a sudden PleinAir became, popular. People started more and more groups and clubs, and I don't know if it's at its high point right now, but
I think it's at its. I think it's at a high point. I hope it's not its highest point, but because there are probably more people PleinAir painting today than I've ever seen. And of course there are now hundreds of events. When we started PleinAir magazine, I don't think there were 20 events and maybe even 10 events in the country. And today there are probably 200 of them, maybe more.
Yeah, every little village has, all of a sudden they have a paint out.
Yeah. Well, how wonderful is that? It's a beautiful thing. So how did you end up going from Germany to the States?
Well, I graduated from my apprenticeship, and one day my family, my dad always traveled. He was an engineer, and he went all over the world. My brother is in the coffee business, and he went to Africa. And I kept always thinking, when is it my turn? I want to see the world too. So one day at work, I just decided to the American consulate in Hamburg and apply for a visa. And a friend of mine had an apartment in New York, and he invited me to come over. So I wanted to only come over for 1 year. And now I remember my mother saying, when we dropped you off in the harbor to go on that freighter, that was the cheapest way to get over here. She said, I knew you weren't coming back. She had been in the States in the 30s. And she said, that is so much more melody. I was never quite as formal or as stiff-necked as a lot of Northern Germans are.
Yeah.
So she swore she knew I wasn't coming back. And sure enough, when I came over here and I was always into nature and wildlife and stuff.
So did you make did you make a living as an artist when you came over here, or what did you do? How did you survive?
I went in New York from advertising agency to agency, and I found a job in a studio, Archer Ames Studio on 56th Street, I think it was. And they were doing a lot of retouching for our biggest client was Revlon. And I tell you, when you work in makeup and the shades of rouges and lipsticks and nail polish, you're one tiny bit off, and it's a different name, the color. So that was, my education came in handy when I worked in that studio in New York.
Absolutely. And so you stayed in New York how
long? 6 months. 7 months, because I got the guy next to me on the next desk got a phone call from Detroit, and Kruger Studios here in Detroit was looking for retouchers. And the guy with his family and stuff, he said, no, I'm not moving, but I got this young guy here from Germany. He lives out of a suitcase, basically. He might be interested. So he flew me to Detroit. I don't know if you know Detroit at all.
Yeah, I know it pretty well.
And it was right next to the Fisher Building, that beautiful Albert Kahn building in Detroit. And again, by then, color photos had shifted more and more to dye transfers. Do you remember dye transfers?
I do, yes.
And I had learned to chemically work on dye transfer prints. We could remove magenta, we could remove cyan, we could add dye, Dr. Martin dyes and stuff. And when something was changed on a image, the client could never see that it was ever touched because there was no opaque paint on the print at all. It was done chemically. We could bleach out certain areas and put them back in and dye.
Yeah, it's a whole different world from today, isn't it?
Oh my God!
Yeah, just going to Photoshop.
Just the fact that if I would, our clients, by then I had switched companies, but here in Detroit, and bought into that company, and our clients were all the car companies. So when I would get a photo of a Cadillac, and the door lines were a little bit too wide. In those days, there was really not a whole lot of, quality control. I mean, some of the door lines you could stick your hand in. And for the catalog, they wanted certainly the door lines real skinny. So I remember bleaching those lines out and then restoring the car color and matching it.
Mm.
It took like a day to do a door line. Now on the computer, it would take about 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's right. So I want to move on to more painting. So you did a career as a retoucher in Detroit. When did you kind of pick up the whole painting thing again outside of your career as a retoucher?
Well, like I said before, I always painted on weekends because I was fascinated by loose oil paintings. And I got into the shows through the carvers. I also sculpt a lot. And the carver saw something I had done, and he said, "Oh, you got to enter Birds and Art in Wisconsin. That's a real prestigious thing."
So when you say the carvers, you're talking about the people who made the car models?
Yeah, decoys, waterfowl.
Oh, waterfowl. Okay, that kind of carvers. All right.
Yeah, they saw a duck I painted and stuff, and they said, "Oh man, you got to enter this Birds and Art thing." And then I met people, and they said, "Oh, we have a show here and there." And so I started doing shows, even though I was still working with 4 daughters and a wife. You know, you don't just all of a sudden decide to only paint.
No, you don't.
So I would do shows on weekends. Then in the 80s, it switched to computers, my business. And I said, okay, I'm too old for this. I'm just going to paint. I had my foot in the door already, but I haven't done shows, and was a member of Society of Animal Artists. Guy Koliak had seen a painting I did, and he said, "Oh, you know, you're now a member of the Society of Animal Artists." He was just very supportive. You know that Guy Koliak, right?
Mm-hmm. So, and at that point, so you quit working, and then you became a full-time artist.
Right.
And were you able to make a living doing that?
Yeah, teaching is the ones where I can make money.
Yeah.
But thank goodness I had my sheep in the barn, so to speak, by having sold my part of the company I owned. You know, it wasn't that I started completely.
I see. Well,
fresh.
It's always nice to have some sheep in the barn. I don't know.
But that doesn't last forever either. I mean,
so curiously, you know, you're unique in the sense that you're kind of a beacon for plein air painting on national television throughout the world, and you're bringing a lot of attention to it and have brought a lot of attention to it over the years. You and really a small handful of other people who happen to have plein air shows on national TV or PBS or something. So what are you finding that people most want to know about? What are the things that are most interesting to them? Are they watching the show and then picking it up and trying it? Are you hearing back from them? What kind of feedback have you had over the years?
90% positive. I mean, they really enjoy the show, and what I try to do, once somebody pointed out that I had actually pretty good people skills, I try to keep the show entertaining, not just the painting part. And people, like I said before, they love it when I goof up or then show them how to fix it. And that's the most comments I get about that. You know, a painting flipped forward into my palette, and I picked it up, and it had little Hershey kisses of every color sticking off my painting. And everybody in my class, everybody went, "Oh my God, oh jeez." Well, as a retoucher, out comes the palette knife. I picked those colors off, put them back on the palette, took a clean brush, blended whatever was there, and by the time they looked again, they thought I had done some kind of a magic trick. But they love it when I show them how to fix things and how to approach a painting so much easier than detail after detail, you know.
One of the things that I have found over the years in interviewing and talking to a lot of artists, especially a lot of very well-known artists, is the most refreshing thing is when you see them make mistakes. I think that's a huge thing, because the rest of us try so hard and we beat up on ourselves. We tell ourselves we aren't very good at this. And to be able to hear someone really well known say, well, I really messed that one up, or I have, 3 out of every 5 paintings, are awful, and I stick them in a closet and don't show them to anybody. It's nice to hear that. It's nice to know that they're human.
Oh yeah. We paint every Saturday with the Michigan PleinAir painters. And last Saturday, I had a wipeout. I must have not really felt good that morning, or too many martini before, or whatever it was. I had a wipeout. And our group loves that, because they think I'm kind of the leader,
Yeah.
And to see that we all can have a bad day, that's fine.
Well, and that's also an important lesson for people who are learning to paint, is that you don't have to get emotionally invested in every piece that you do, that you have the option of scraping it down if you want to.
Oh, yeah. My classes, when I do teach classes, I normally start the first day by telling the students, in 2 days or 3 days or whatever the length of the workshop, I will not be able to make you a real good painter. But what I guarantee you I can do is make you see the world differently. And sure enough, it works every time, where after 3 days, they said, when I'm driving now, I study the values in the clouds, and all of a sudden I look at distances are bluer, and I never knew that. And they are sometimes 60 years old, and they never seen it.
Right.
And to me, that is the most gratifying, delightful thing, to open somebody's eyes,
Well, I think that's absolutely right, because you when you become an artist, you really do see the world through different eyes. It gives me, I'm sitting here, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about that, because it is so important, because it's something that a lot of people never get in their lives. And I've told the story on this show before about how, I'd be in situations and I'll go, hey, look at that light, look at that pink glowing light. And they'll look at me like I'm from Mars.
Well, they think you have ADD, which you probably have.
I do.
All artists do.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, my wife wants to medicate me.
I have a sweatshirt that reads, they say I have ADD, but they don't know what they're talking. Oh, look, a chicken. That's what artists do. When we drive and we're talking about anything, all of a sudden you see a cloud and you interrupt your sentence and you go, look at this.
It's true. It's true. So what is the process that you help these people in their first 3 or 4 days, help them see? What do you go through with them in that class?
First of all, I teach them to simplify a scene and not take on too many things at once. Learn to pick one little scene out of whatever you're looking at and concentrate, mark your left border and your right border of that little scene, and forget the rest that you see out of your peripheral, whatever that vision is that goes off to the side.
Peripheral.
Okay, the big word. But once you teach them that, they're a little less scared already. And then I tell them to break it down into no more than 4 or 5 or 6 shapes, big shapes. The road, the woods, the mountains, the sky, or something. By then they're not scared anymore by all the detail that we see. And the squinting is the next part that eliminates detail. You know that.
Yep. Yeah, but a lot of the people who are listening to this, obviously many do, but there's a lot of new people listening who are just learning these things. And so these are very helpful little things.
Yeah, and you know what the next thing is? I should make a list and write down, simplify, squint, break the area down into 5 shapes. Because, believe it or not, I forget to squint, and I've been doing it for so many years.
Yeah. Well, that's normal.
And yeah, I know. So if you have a little list in your paint box, just a little reminder, do you have a focal point? Make sure the values are right. and glance at that every once in a while and just see if you did it all.
Yeah, that's kind of like a flight checklist for an airplane. You know, when you first start an airplane, you have to go through a checklist of several things.
Yeah, make a little checklist.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also tell them from the very beginning, don't jump into a painting without checking other ways of doing it. Should it be horizontal? Should it be vertical? Maybe if you are lucky enough to paint with some other artists, maybe even show them what you laid out and say, do you think this is going to work? Because there's tangents that when you're doing it yourself, you don't see. You would see it on everybody else's painting right away, but on your own, you don't.
Yeah, for the people who are listening that don't know what a tangent is, it is?
When you had a photograph where there was a church steeple sticking out of your grandpa's head on a family photo. Yeah. That's a bad tangent.
Yeah.
Or, stuff like that, where two lines meet in an uncomfortable way.
Okay, what else is on your big checklist?
Edges, and that I learned from, I'm very, very, very fond of Richard Schmidt. I couldn't believe it. I studied it like other people study the Bible in his first books years ago. And he stressed all the time how important edges are, soft versus hard edges, and how little it is actually taught in art classes.
Right.
And by doing that and paying attention to edges, I try to teach my students that too. I mean, it's a little bit more advanced, but once you show them, it really makes sense to them immediately too.
Well, especially if they've got a hard edge at a horizon in the distance and you just take your finger and you smush it and it just all of a sudden recedes, they get that.
It goes back 20 miles.
Yeah, they get that very quickly.
Yeah, and here again, it's a very enjoyable part about teaching. When you see the light come on in somebody's head, when they go all of a sudden, oh, yeah. It's just like a light bulb going on.
Now, when you're teaching, are you teaching them painting first in studio, or are you painting outdoors right away?
Well, when it's a one-day workshop, we go out right away. But I do about an hour before we go out inside, so they have an idea of, how to start this. On longer workshops, depends on the students too. If they're brand new and really kind of never painted before, then you go slower, certainly. There's a lot of talking about brushes and palette knife and how to set up your equipment, and especially the French easels, you need an engineering degree for them to get that fixed.
Well, you should have no trouble with that because you're German, right? So you're Mr. Detail.
Yeah, but that's why I never called it really a French easel.
Well, I noticed you're using a Soltec. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a nice easel.
Well, I already fixed the common leg problem by cutting the Soltec legs off and bought a tripod for a sprinkler at Menards for $28, and they have 3 legs and have snaps like a tripod. They fit right in there. Good old Wilcox is going to kill me when he sees that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Jim will be calling me and saying, "Why didn't you edit that out?"
Hey, that's just German engineering. I just putz around with stuff.
Well, you know what? I do the same thing. I take existing products and then I modify them all the time. As a matter of fact, I won't mention the name of the product, but because I try not to be one who endorses one over the other, because I have a lot of advertisers. I don't want to make anybody mad. But
I love the Soltec easel. I really do. I mean, that's all. It's my 3rd one already.
All right, good. So, and I had one of those as well. But I'm always drilling holes and
Oh
modifying
yeah,
things,
yeah.
drilling holes so I can put hooks in or bungee cords or
Oh,
uh,
brushes. Yeah.
yeah, just it's you have to make it work for you. Yeah, and there's a lot of really great products out there, and they're all different and they all have benefits, but you got to make it work for you.
I think anybody that is into whatever sport or hobby loves putzing with the equipment. May it be golf or photography or fishing, or everybody always has a better mousetrap. If I do this to it, that would be even better.
Yeah, I think that's true. So
It's fun.
when you're out traveling, if you're going, let's say going back to Germany or you're going to Europe or something like that, do you go painting when you go on those kind of trips?
It's mostly so booked up that there's hardly any time. I'm going in October to see my brother and my sister in Hamburg, but it's only a week. And I know that Diane, who's going with me, wants to see the city and wants to see maybe even Berlin for a day. There's no time to paint. What I do is I photograph like crazy and have actually done paintings. Of my sister lives in the heather, which is south of Hamburg, and it's purple as far as your eye can see when the heather blooms.
Mm.
And I took so many pictures, and I actually painted it when I came back here over and over.
So do you have trouble painting from photographs because of how
Oh, no.
photographs distort things?
No, I make sure I correct the distortion.
Yeah.
One good example is when somebody's painting a lion laying down looking at you. They photographed it in the zoo with a long lens, and the legs foreshortened. I look at those paintings and I can just about tell you what lens they used. When they took this. You gotta correct that. You can't just do what the lens does.
Well, about the only lens that you can use where things are not completely distorted is a 50 millimeter lens, which is basically close to what the eye sees, but even that's not perfect.
Yeah, but see, when it's wildlife, and especially in Africa or in a zoo, where you have to shoot with a telephoto lens, a long lens,
Yep.
there's so much foreshortening going on.
Well, I need to take a lesson from you on that then, because I'm taking a group of painters to Africa, and we are actually going to paint out in the bush. We have guards that'll be with us in case the animals get a little too close, but we'll also be doing a lot of photographs and
I did
paintings
the
later.
same thing. I had the driver and the guy and the guard sitting next to me. And little interesting story. I said, we haven't seen any lions yet after about 5 days. And he said, got on the phone and found, there's a kudu kill. So we went out there. And I got out of the Jeep and I walked down there in a little ditch. And here's the half-eaten kudu. And I said to the guy, is the lion coming back to finish the rest? And he said, oh, she's here. I said, what do you mean she's here? He said, just a minute. And he went back up to the car and he got the clip for his gun out of the glove box. I said, that's refreshing. You never had the clip for the gun. Scared the dickens out of it.
You could have been a meal.
Yeah, well, and then he said, no, she's here. She's watching us. So we got in the Jeep and drove through the tall grass, and sure enough, off she goes, tail sticking up over the grass, running away.
Huh.
I mean, you'll have fun. Where are you going?
Oh, we're going all over. We're going to, one of the things I'm looking forward to is we're going to spend like two or 3 days at Victoria Falls. It's such a, it's got one of the most spectacular waterfall, probably the most spectacular waterfall in the world. So we're going to spend extra time there. Yeah. And then we're going all over. You can find out at the website.
Don't go to Zimbabwe.
Yeah, I've heard that. We're not.
Oh, man.
So for the people out there who might be listening to this who have kind of just started out plein air painting, what's the best advice you can give them?
Study whoever you can, read whatever you can. If you somehow you got turned on to plein air painting by something. If it was somebody, call him and say, hey, I'm interested in learning this. What can you help me with? Asking is the best teacher, I think, and taking advice from other people. I still do it. I still compare my paintings to paintings that are done the same day when we paint on Saturdays with a group. I still see good parts that I wish I could have seen. There's never an end to learning in this thing. Do you think?
No, I don't think so. There's never an end. And the painters who don't continue to be curious and don't continue to push themselves, I think probably get a little stale. And I think you want to be constantly looking at how you can go to the next level, how you can improve. I was on the phone with Scott Christensen a couple of days ago, and this is a guy who, he could stop learning and could settle where he is and make plenty of money and do plenty of paintings and never have a problem. But, he's not that way. He wants to just constantly be going to the next level. And he was talking about the struggle he was going through and how he got to the next level. And I think that's so refreshing.
When I see a so-called creative person, an artist, a painter, doing the same paintings he did 30 years ago, and I could tell immediately, oh, yeah, that's it. But you don't know if it was done 20 years ago or yesterday. That to me is just stale. There's no searching and learning, and
Well,
we were on the bus.
Every personality is going to be different. From my perspective, absolutely, I have to keep trying and keep growing and keep going to different places. So I certainly know people who want to just kind of stay where they are, but I prefer to move forward.
One extreme case was we went from Birds and Art in Wisconsin on a bus to a summer place. They take you every year, and Robert Bateman was sitting in front of me, and his wife, Christina was German. We were talking in German. And I watched Robert Bateman with a sketch pad, just drawing with a pencil, the driver's hands, the driver's head. I finally said, hey, Bob, are you always drawing? He said, you know what? If I don't do that every day, I'm terrible at it. I got to do it every day. And that really surprised me from somebody like Bateman.
Yeah, well, he's a master. You keep that hand-eye coordination going. I was in Russia. I'm getting ready to go again, and I was over there, and I was with Nikolai Dubovik, who's a good friend of mine. He's a Russian master, teaches at the Sarakov Institute. And I said, what is the most important thing, if there is a most important thing? He said, always be drawing. Always be drawing. I noticed we were at a restaurant waiting for a table or something, and he had pulled out his sketchbook and was sketching people while he was standing there. Just always.
I do it at the airport. Yeah, I do it everywhere too.
Yeah, I do too. I have lots of pictures of the backs of people's heads on airplanes.
That's right. Or sleeping, sitting sleeping. What do you do when you get a student that paid up and everything, and the first thing they tell you is, I can't draw, but they took a painting workshop? I'm always, I grit my teeth, because basic to painting is drawing. What are you going to paint if you can't draw?
Who's interviewing who here? You're asking me questions. I can't answer that question for you.
Okay.
I have to admit, and I'm not necessarily proud of this, but I started painting before I ever learned how to draw, and I struggled for a lot of years, and finally, because I had my stuff just didn't look right, and so finally I called Danny Grant, who's a local artist here. He's a phenomenal draftsman. He does a podcast, and I said, Danny, come over and teach me how to draw properly. And so, he came over once a week, and we'd spend a couple hours, and he'd have me drawing things. And that made a huge, huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think you should interview every workshop person before they come and find out if they have what it takes.
Yeah, what I told you earlier, but in my apprenticeship, the first 3 months was just drawing. Yeah. And he would put a house key in front of you, or a glass with a toothbrush in it. And he said, it doesn't matter if it takes you 2 days, but draw that. And then he checked the proportions, and if it was off, it was do it again. If it was wrong, do it again.
Yep.
I mean, you start paying attention to ellipses and angles and perspective. And
well, the guy that taught me originally, we were doing copies of old masterworks, and he would say, okay, if you're going to paint that tree, I'm going to come over and I'm going to count the leaves on that tree. And if you have one leaf too few, one leaf too many, I'm going to scrape it down. And, you know, he had us all scared to death. And I remember one time he came over, this woman had been painting on this painting for weeks, and he came over and he scraped it down. And I think she went insane at that moment. She just started bawling and screaming, and it was really not a pretty sight. And I don't like that. But most of us got that message real quickly, and that was pay close attention, because if you don't, I'm going to mess with you. So.
Yeah. It's one pretty common line when an artist shows me a painting and wants a critique or something. Often it is, be a little bit more critical. Look a little longer at the subject and study the values and study the characteristic shapes in a tree or in a bush. Or don't just have one brush full of a certain color and then go all over. And sometimes the student sits there, PleinAir painting, and I watch him, and then I go up to him and I said, what are you painting? And they look up and they point at something. And I said, how come you haven't looked up in the last 3 minutes? How can you paint something when you don't look up at it? Do you got photographic memory or something? But they get so involved in their canvas and in their painting, they don't look at the subject anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
that's a common mistake.
You know, in their defense, there's an awful lot to think about. When you first go out there, you're just trying to survive, and you know you forget. But those things are right, and yeah. I think there's a fine line between being an encouraging instructor and being appropriately harsh. And I don't mean harsh in a bad way, and certainly not being a jerk, but I think that it's very important that you hold people to certain standards.
Oh, certainly. You know, and again, that's normally understood with my students, that afterwards we do a critique when the lesson is over, the workshop. We line all the paintings up, and people are scared of it normally.
Yeah.
The newcomers are. But I tell them, I said, there will be a critique, and you learn more in that half hour of critiquing than you did the whole day painting.
And you learn more by the critiques of other people's paintings than your own, because you're You're freaking out when they're critiquing yours.
And I tell them, too, that I will say negative things that you can learn from, and I will point out what you did just beautifully. But if I only say, oh, that's nice, you don't learn anything.
Right.
You know, and you can do that when you come home and your Aunt Lily is sitting there and she says, oh, that is so beautiful, you know. And I tell people, when you have a painting that you really don't like, don't wipe it out yet. Save it. You give it to somebody for Christmas that you don't like. Yeah, they always like that.
That's very
too.
funny. That is very funny. That's priceless.
So we always do have fun. I mean, we do. You know, I don't like when you said that somebody takes somebody else's paintings and just wipes it out. That's rude.
Yeah.
Say something nice.
Well, the other thing about old paintings, and one reason not to give them to your Aunt Lily, is because there's a real tremendous value in being able to see your growth. We have a place that we go every year in upstate New York, and I usually don't bring my paintings home from the summer. I put them out around the house. That way, when I get there a year later, I can see them, and I can instantly, because I've been away from them, I can instantly spot things that I did well, things that I didn't do well. I had one particular painting this summer that I looked at, and I thought, you know, that's a good painting. But when I left it, I didn't think it was a good painting. But, you know, gaining that perspective. But also, I have every painting I've ever done, including the very early stage stuff. I never sand it down. I never throw it away. And once about every 2 years, I just pull them all out and just start looking at them. And it's nice to be able to see, well, I didn't handle that well, but I handled this well. And,
Yeah.
and you look a year later and you see how much better you've gotten.
Look how much better my trees got, and look at my clouds and how much, Yeah, that's what you should do. I agree.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a quick question about this art business altogether.
Okay,
Now
so
with
who's
everybody
interviewing who
creating-
here?
Well, right now
You just
I'm
can't help it.
interviewing
You know, you're a media personality. You can't help it. I get it.
No, I need to learn something.
Okay,
I need
all right.
to learn
All
what
right.
to do with 500 plein-air paintings in my basement.
All right, I will grant you 2 questions.
What do I do with 500 plein-air paintings in the basement?
Tile the floor?
Galleries get so overloaded now. Some don't even want any more plein-air paintings because everybody and his brother is doing it and bringing them in.
Oh, I don't know about
How-
that.
Well, I get that from galleries. They said, please send studio pieces. We have so many plein-air pieces.
Well, I think it depends on the gallery. I don't even send my galleries plein air pieces. I only send them studio pieces because I don't sell my plein air studies. I want to keep them because they're all wonderful memories. And sometimes
You're right. But we paint every Saturday, and then often on every trip, they stack up. I cannot believe how many I have.
Yeah. Well, if you look up Winston Churchill and you see a picture of his studio, he had managed to frame every square inch. He had some kind of a very unique framing system, and he was consistent in his sizes. And so every square inch, including the roof of the building of his studio, was filled with paintings. And I'm not doing it exactly that way, but I put them all around, and sometimes I put them away. And once in a while I'll give one away, but I just kind of like to have them. I think it would be fun to actually put them down on the floor and then put some kind of a see-through substance over it so they don't get ruined.
And walk on them.
But I'm not going to put the good ones down there. Now, I have another question for you. Do you tend to take do you keep the paintings out of the studio so that you're not cluttering your mind when you're working on studio pieces, or do you have them all around? I've seen pictures of your studio. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a dream place for me. After I built it, it's 4 years old now, and it's exactly what I wanted.
Yeah.
I got the walls are full of studio pieces, and there's no more room to hang anything on the walls here.
Yeah. Well, you better start selling some paintings.
Okay, now let me interview you. How do I do that?
Well, there's this guy who has this series called Art Marketing Boot Camp, and he has a website called artmarketing.com, and he's brilliant. He's helped lots of artists sell lots of paintings, and all you have to do is spend lots of money, and he'll probably teach you how to do it. How'd I do?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, I'm kind of worried. How is he going to teach me how to get into a gallery or something?
Well, there's a whole series on that.
Very good galleries.
Whole series on that. Well, they're just going to come clamoring at your door after being on the podcast, so you won't have to worry about that ever again. You will never want for anything ever again. How's that?
Can I call you? I recorded that, by the way. That's going to come back to bite you.
Yeah. So this has deteriorated considerably since we started this interview, so we're going to have to wrap it up. Do you have any final thoughts for the 1 or 2 people who are listening still?
Well, thank you so much for having me and having asked me.
It's been fun getting to know you.
Hopefully our relationship grows over the Santa Fe, where we talked about a little bit earlier that we might be able to film a couple episodes, which would be interesting for, guests to watch.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I think that would be kind of a little attraction of.
Yeah, I think you should. I think you should.
PleinAir shows are filmed.
Well, there's no other PleinAir shows, but you should come out to the PleinAir convention and film a couple of episodes. You'll meet everybody there, and of course, people will be clamoring for your autograph.
Well, yeah.
And maybe they'll buy those paintings that are going to go on the floor.
The way it's going, I'm going to sign a painting and give it as an autograph plus the painting. Hey, please take it. I need room in my house.
You'd be the most popular guy in town. Well, Heiner, thank you so much for your time today. It was really a lot of fun interviewing you.
Okay. That's how I try to keep my shows going, too, that, you forget about time and space. You just have fun.
Yeah, well, it's been a lot of fun. Well, thanks again to Heiner. I think that one got a little out of control. What do you think? Today's interview is brought to you by the PleinAir Salon bi-monthly art competition. It's got $31,000 in cash prizes. Now, we've just upped the ante, plus $15,000 for the grand prize winner. And you get the cover of PleinAir magazine. Bi-monthly winners also win features in the newsletter, PleinAir Today. And there's also cash prizes for some of the bi-monthly winners. So enter your best studio or PleinAir, several categories from best PleinAir, best landscape, best figure in the landscape, nocturne painting, architecture, several others. And we even have some for the amateurs and newbies. And so lots of categories. You'll be seen by prominent art gallery professionals who judge usually, or top artists. And they oftentimes discover people this way. So get your entry in before September 30th. Enter soon at PleinAirSalon.com. Well, the PleinAir movement is red hot, which may be why PleinAir magazine is the top-selling representational art magazine sold nationwide at Barnes & Noble. Drop by, pick one up, or get a bi-monthly subscription for about half the price at PleinAirMagazine.com. And don't forget to register for Fall Color Week. Incredible week of painting. You deserve it. Give yourself a break. FallColorWeek.com. This is always fun for me. Let's do it again sometime like next week. We'll see you then. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. It's a big world out there, so remember to go out and paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.